Welcome to the Alton Towers Resort. It's early morning at the moment, and the park is closed. But soon, thousands of people will walk through these turnstiles, ready for a day out at the UK's biggest theme park. But there's something strange about Alton Towers. An old folk story about an oak tree and a family curse. It forms the basis for one of the rides in the park. But is this just some theme park magic? A story made up by the park to frighten and excite? Or could the legend actually be true?
The ride, Hex, Legend of the Towers, was installed at the park in the year 2000. Partly located in the old armoury of the Alton Towers ruins, the original site of the park's gift shop, and the Octagon, another original feature restored in 1999 especially for the ride. It's part atmospheric walkthrough and part illusion. The climax being a Vekoma madhouse, a kind of swinging gondola inside a rotating drum, creating the impression of moving upside down. It's one of the most unique attractions in the park, and remains popular over 25 years since it first opened, a fact these theme park fans were quick to point out.
I just like how it's spooky during the day, but on a night, when we were the only people in it, it got a whole different spookier. It's a lot eerier on a night than it is during the day.
I like the fact it's based on an actual legend, so you feel like you're in the legend, and it's interesting. I want to go see the tree.
Yeah, I like Hex, but I haven't been on it in about 2 years because it's been broken. But yeah, I like the interior, I like the storyline.
Brilliant. It has changed a little bit over the last couple of years. They've added lights and stuff. If you're epileptic, you might not want to enter it now.
The ride tells the story of the 15th Earl of Shrewsbury, said to have encountered an old beggar woman while riding by coach back to his home at Alton Towers. When he refused her demands for charity, she cursed him, stating that for every branch of the old oak tree which fell, a member of the Earls family would die. The prophecy was soon realised, as a terrible storm severed a branch from the ancient tree, and on that same night, a member of the family suddenly died. So frightened by these events, the Earl soon ordered every branch on the tree to be chained up, thereby preventing the curse from claiming any more lives. According to the ride, he then dragged the fallen branch back to the towers, conducting strange experiments on it, and sealing it away in a hidden vault, a location revealed to be the very site of the ride, where the spinning room awaits.
So all that part about the Earl dragging the chained oak back to the towers and doing experiments on it and some type of hidden vault inside there in the castle, all that part of the story is actually made up by Alton Towers. It's just there to say, why are we going through into this vault and going on this crazy ride? But the rest of the story isn't that clear-cut. In fact, everything that you hear on there before that last part of the tale is actually a real folklore story from the local area. Something which predates the founding of Alton Towers as a theme park by many, many years. So the question remains, is the story true?
My first step in tracing the origins of this tale, and with it the truth behind the curse, was simple. The chained oak tree really exists, and can still be found today. It's about a mile on foot outside of the park, and although its location is not widely publicised, I was able to quickly track it down.
So this is the real chained oak, here just on the outskirts of Alton Towers, and it's an absolute giant of a tree. It's said to be over 700 years old, which would make this tree a sapling when King Edward II sat on the throne and England was invaded by Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer. But looking at this tree though, I would say it's actually far older. In fact, I would say this tree could easily be well over 1,000 years old. Lots of people come to the tree and they report a strange, ghostly atmosphere around it. Something perhaps partly inspired by Hex the Ride, and partly just being in the presence of such a giant, a living thing, a misshapen oak man who has lived here long before the days that we were born, and will continue to do so long after we are gone. And people actually leave little trinkets and locks, and they etch their name into the wood, and they leave basically offerings here at the tree. Let's go and see if we can find some. And so here are some of the actual chains themselves as well. So these have been here for who knows how long. And these are really big, thick, heavy chains. There's loads of them actually tied to the branches really high up as well. It must have taken quite some effort to get these on here. This has been done with purpose and meaning. Meaning that of course is now forever lost to us in folklore stories, myths and legends.
It was clear that something really did happen here. Something that required these time-worn chains to be carefully tied around the branches. But then, why was it this tree which was associated with the curse? Why not one of the other ancient oaks in the woodland? Or one of the many thousands of trees planted by the Earls of Shrewsbury to create this wonderful carriageway to Alton Towers?
Just look as well at this huge outcrop of rock which is actually coming right out of the tree. So we're in an area that's rich in limestone, and the chained oak has literally grown in and around this fantastic, huge, great big lump of stone. And the strange thing is, things like this back in the distant past would be thought of as the dwelling place of the fairies and the gnomes and the nature spirits. And just looking at the size of this tree, I could really imagine that type of folklore having sprang up here throughout the years. As well as that, of course, I'm really interested in the matter of these stairs leading up to the tree. They've clearly been there for quite some time, and it just wouldn't surprise me if there hadn't been some far older folklore story here. Something far earlier in time than that 19th century myth, which has been added later like layers through time.
My suspicions turned out to be true. In fact, one of the earliest surviving versions of this tale, dating from some time in the 17th century, tells of a witch using the tree to bind a spirit. This is a popular motif in folklore, something seen in many regions of the country, and similar in some ways to an exorcism, with a malevolent entity bound or trapped inside a box, a stone, or a tree, thereby preventing the spirit itself from roaming free, but possessing the object with its presence in return. If the item is destroyed, opened, or otherwise tampered with, the spirit may be seen as escaping from its prison and all manner of misfortune may occur. In this case, could not the witch be the origin of the beggar woman in the later version, and the bound spirit the origin of the tree as something cursed and unlucky? There is, of course, nothing in the records to confirm or deny this, but we know from antiquity that trees have long been thought of as sacred. Oak groves in particular were seen as gateways to the spirit world, venerated by druidic ritual where mistletoe may be cut from the tree, and associated with everything from mischievous fairies to protective magic. They were also concerned with gods of thunder and storms, with the Norse god Thor, the Greek Zeus, and the Slavic Perun, amongst only some of the deities to be associated with this tree. Something rather topical when we consider that the chained oak was, allegedly, struck by lightning. We may never know when myth and magic first found itself caught up in the misshapen branches of the Alton oak, but it is certain that something inspired the early version of this tale. Something that was twisted by time into the form of a witch, and later a beggar. She may be even older than first imagined, a remnant of some long-lost spirit of place, a local deity worshipped by our Iron Age ancestors, who dwelt in the now-forgotten Bunbury Hill Fort, built on the site of what would one day be Alton Towers. Such cultures were believed to be animistic in nature, seeing everything as containing a spirit, something believed to be the oldest and most fundamental aspect of the spiritual lives of ancient people. In fact, whispers of such beliefs continued well into the Roman occupation of Britain, with ritual sites and shrines appearing in the sacred groves, something later named as Högr in Old Norse and Hereg by the Anglo-Saxons, with both words referring to a holy grove or temple, and in even older Proto-Germanic as Hago, a pasture or enclosure. This word would also be seen in the lexical blend Hago Tusho, a hedge witch, a possible origin of the Old English Hagatesse for the same thing, and even, oddly enough, the Germanic word hex. All words of unknown origin, but by the time of Middle English, having become shortened into the term hag, the same wizened old witch seen in the early folk tale, and its later retelling with the Earl of Shrewsbury. The chained oak was real, and so was the oak tree's history of myth and magic. So then, what about the next part of this fascinating tale? The Earl of Shrewsbury and the cursed family, like told to riders on Hex at Alton Towers. This part of the story dates from the 19th century, and appears to have been something well known in the local area, with multiple variations of the tale in existence. Unfortunately though, the story is not present in any collections of folklore from the time, making the job of tracing its origin a lot harder. That said, some variations are easily dismissed, such as the idea that children threw chains around the tree for fun, or that a passing tinker heard that the tree was a chine, a French word for the oak tree, and, mishearing this as chain, took some iron-linked chaining from his cart and hung them around the tree. These stories are absurd and easily disproved. The chains on the tree are extremely heavy and expensive, and they were clearly hung with a great deal of effort from a team of men. Even so, was the tree really chained because of a curse? Some have suggested that the ancient trees on the carriageway were highly regarded by the Talbot family, and thus it may have been chained in an attempt to preserve it, or even to reduce the likelihood of fallen branches blocking the path and causing injury. This remains a very real possibility, especially when we consider that giant oaks often cause a loud noise when moved by the wind, something akin to a ghostly groaning, and so chains may have been used simply to reduce this annoying and unsettling effect. Things get stranger though, when looking at the stories themselves. A popular variation on this tale is that instead of a beggar woman in the forest, the beggar was instead a man who came to the doors of Alton Towers itself. He begged for food in exchange for the telling of fortunes, but he was cruelly dismissed and made fun of by the family. Afterwards, he laid upon them the familiar curse of the old tree, and shortly thereafter, the Earl's son, riding on horseback along the carriageway, was caught in a sudden storm, resulting in the severing of a branch, which crushed him beneath it.
There seems to be nothing in the historical archives about an event like that, and so really, something like that, a kind of dramatic way to be killed, it would definitely be recorded in some way, so I think we can discount that version of the story. But the other thing with that is you can't really talk about the Earl's son or any other member of his family without knowing which Earl of Shrewsbury we're actually talking about. The Earl of Shrewsbury is a hereditary title. It's something that passes down automatically through the generations. There's 22 different Earls of Shrewsbury to date, and they're not all connected with Alton Towers, of course, but the one mentioned on Hex is the 15th Earl of Shrewsbury, Charles Talbot, and the date given for this event is 1821. But the painting that you actually see on the ride is a painting of this person here, and this is not the 15th Earl. It's actually the 16th Earl of Shrewsbury, John Talbot, and that would actually align with some other historical sources from the local area that had the curse taking place in around 1840, the time when this Earl lived at Alton Towers. But then we've got this as well. This is an old newspaper clipping from the Stoke Sentinel, and it's actually dated from 1926. And this talks, as we can see, about the curse of the old tree at Alton Towers. And it says there is a very old oak tree near the middle lodge at Alton Towers, reputed to be 600 years old. And this is the interesting part. It says, over 40 years ago, the late Lord Shrewsbury ordered the limbs to be supported by large crane chains. That, of course, changes the story yet again. That would place the curse as sometime in the 1880s. And so it wouldn't be the 15th Earl or the 16th Earl, but would actually be the 20th Earl of Shrewsbury, Charles Chetwynd Talbot.
It was all a bit confusing, to say the least, and would require much further research into the history not just of the estate, but of the Earls themselves. Out of the three most likely candidates, the 15th Earl, Charles, was perhaps the most well-known when we look at Alton Towers how it appears today. It is he who began the landscaping of the famous gardens, earning him the name, he who made the desert smile, something many guests have seen today in the park, with this famous sculpture in the Alton Towers gardens. Along with architects like Robert Abrahams and Thomas Allison, The gardens and pathways were enclosed, and their natural features were brought alive by careful planning and construction, with features like the well-loved Chinese pagoda fountain and the grand conservatories added to the site. These, along with the sculptures, walkways and avenues of the area, help to create a leisure garden to delight both guests and family alike. Something which was, strangely enough, a bit like the predecessor of theme parks as a concept. The ability to lose oneself in a purpose-built wonderland, with enclosed spaces seeming to suggest the passage into a different world or state of being. The fact that much of these original features survive today, as the modern rides around them come and go with the changing of fashions, speaks volumes for the quality and longevity of our love for the simple glory of the garden. Charles Talbot, though, did not suffer any losses to his family in a way that would suggest the curse of the oak tree, and nothing survives in archival materials to suggest that it was he who chained up the branches. One cannot help but wonder, though, about those strange steps leading up to the tree. Could it be he who ordered their construction, along with the main gardens at Alton Towers? Unfortunately, the steps do not show up on Ordnance Survey maps of the area until the 1880s, a fact which seems to place their origin with the 20th Earl, the same one mentioned in the newspaper archive as being responsible for the tree's chaining. So then, what about John Talbot, the 16th Earl? He is known to have continued the work of his predecessor at Alton Towers, and at nearby Alton Castle, remodelled by the famous architect Augustus Pugin under the guidance of the visionary Earl. It was he who renamed the estate as Alton Towers, and he was widely remembered as the good Earl John for his charitable giving, helping to finance schools, churches, and even the Cathedral of St. Chad in Birmingham. He also financed the construction of a humanitarian almshouse, a kind of hospital which provided for the elderly and sick of the parish, something seen by the Earl as doing more good for the community than any monastery would have done. He was, for all intents and purposes, a very different man from the Earl described in the story of Hex in the park. There was something about him, though. Something that could not be ignored when looking at the story of the cursed oak tree. It was the story of his daughter, Lady Gwendolen Talbot, described by King William IV as the greatest beauty in the realm. In 1835, she married Marcantonio Borghese, the 8th Prince of Sulmona, a wedding which brought her a royal title of her own. Dwelling in Rome, she also became a patron of the sick and infirm, and it is said that she rejected the pomp and ceremony one expects of a princess, and in 1837 she worked tirelessly for the orphaned children of a cholera outbreak which was sweeping the region, offering medicine, clothing, and supplies to everybody in need. Then, in 1840, the same year given as the date of the curse by some local sources, she returned to visit her parents at Alton Towers. She spent 5 months there, and even gave birth to her 3rd son while staying at the luxurious family estate. And in October of that year, she returned to Rome for what would be the final time. Only a week after returning to Rome from Alton Towers, she fell gravely ill with scarlet fever, something that even the best doctors were powerless to treat and she died shortly after, at midday on the 27th of October. Following this, all 3 of her sons contracted measles when a local outbreak fell across the area, and only months following the death of Lady Gwendolen, all of them died, one after another. For the Earl, the unexpected loss not only of his daughter, but of all 3 grandchildren in such a short period of time, must have been all but impossible to fully process. At such a time, shaken by sudden grief and despair, it is certainly possible that old family memories of misfortune were retold, framed in such ways as to answer the unknowable question that fell upon him. Why? How could this happen? In such a time, could not the old stories of a witch and a bound spirit be unearthed once more? A tale we know to have existed from at least the 17th century. If this was so, and an examination of the tree found a branch had indeed fallen from it, for example, during a thunderstorm, could not the God-fearing Earl, a devoted and lifelong Catholic, feel that some great evil, a curse, had befallen him and his family that night? But if so, did he really order for the tree to be chained up? As it turns out, the story was not finished yet. The sad story of the 16th Earl appears in some way to confirm one thing. Evidence does exist of great personal tragedy in the family, all happening around the same time as many claim the curse was cast. So then, what about the chains themselves? The very thing to give the chained oak its name, as well as forming the basis of Hex Ride, and even more to be seen in the local area close to Alton Towers. It is certainly possible that the 16th Earl, so frightened and grief-stricken by the events of 1840, did indeed order the tree to be chained up in a sudden wave of superstitious fear and anxiety. There is only one problem with this hypothesis, that being that our only printed reference to the chaining, the newspaper clip from 1926, places the event as sometime in the 1880s, by which time John Talbot had been dead for 30 years. As this clip formed the only solid evidence of an earl chaining up the tree, it could not simply be disregarded as error, even if the dates themselves were approximate. More than 40 years could mean closer to 50, or as near as 20. And so, was it possible that, despite his family tragedy, the 16th Earl left the tree as it was? And it was in fact the 20th Earl, Charles Chetwynd Talbot, who famously dressed it up in chains. And if so, then why? The first clue was already noted. The steps leading up to the oak only appear on surveyors' maps from the same time as the 20th Earl held the estate. And there was more, too. Charles Chetwynd appeared far different in character from that of his predecessors, more businesslike and modern. The founder of Talbot Cars and many other business ventures. He was also a great admirer of horse-drawn coach riding, and frequently rode the greyhound or the fast coach from the town of Buxton to his seat at Alton Towers. This, of course, is exactly how the Earl is shown in the story, and even how he appears in the famous scene on Hex Ride. Did an old woman really approach him on the track and curse him in response to his lack of charity? Strangely enough, it is this 20th Earl who perhaps first guided Alton Towers in the direction it would ultimately follow. In the 1890s, he began a tradition of holding summer fairs in the estate gardens, events which included fireworks, circus displays, balloons, and all manner of festivities, which laid the groundwork for the Towers as a new kind of leisure destination. In later years, he would also be the Earl who set in motion the sale of Alton Towers, selling off pieces of outlying land, and eventually placing the home itself on the market. After all, it was not his only estate. For much of his life, the 20th Earl lived at Ingestre Hall, near to Stafford, and it is here where tragedy also fell upon the Earl and his family. In October 1882, Charles Chetwynd and his wife, Ellen Palmer Morwood, were staying at Alton Towers. At around 5 p.m. on the evening of the 12th of the month, a fire broke out in one of the bedrooms at their other estate at Ingestre. A private fire engine was soon sent for, and domestic servants who escaped from the blaze helped to remove whatever they could of the valuables inside. But it was too little, too late. In a short period of time, the entire estate was engulfed by flame, so that by the time the Earl and his wife arrived by carriage, they found the house reduced to a burning shell, with only the outer walls remaining, and almost everything inside was lost. The date of this disaster, 1882, is the same approximate period of time as the newspaper claims the chains were installed on the oak, and also the same time as when the steps to the tree appeared on the maps. So did the Earl chain the tree up as a response to his own personal tragedy, linking it, perhaps, to the previous events of his ancestor John Talbot, and sensing the curse was once more active? On paper, at least, it appears that it was indeed the 20th Earl who installed the chains. But was this haughty businessman really the sort to place his faith in such stories? After all, when Ingestre burnt down, he simply ordered it to be rebuilt, with electricity running all throughout it, a decision which led to its status as one of the first houses of its kind lit entirely by electric lighting. That said, it is notable that his first and only son, Charles John Alton, was born that same year, only a month in fact before the fire at Ingestre. His place of birth was Alton Towers. However, the bells of the village church were unable to ring to celebrate his birth, as that same year, 1882, the bells were silenced due to the tower being regarded as unsafe, quite likely the result of storm damage. And so, we have an estate in flames, and the dreadful silence of a church without its bells. And to top it off, a newborn son, born into a family where tragedy fell upon the sons of Lady Gwendolen, and where strange and old tales of curses were eternally retold. Knowing this, is it really so outlandish to imagine that he, the industrious and gallant man that he was, would not build steps up to the ancient tree, steps that would allow those in his employ to hang heavy chains around its branches, thereby claiming victory over whatever remained of the old curse, a story he had no doubt heard repeated from the time of his own youth, and may have seemed, even if only for a moment, to be showing itself once again that year. There is, of course, no way of knowing. Such is the nature of old folk stories, layered in time and scarred with memory, like the dendrochronological rings of the tree itself. What is certain is that something happened at the old oak tree, something that still affects us today, as we continue to visit the ruins of Alton Towers, still hearing those same old stories, retold in new and spectacular ways. It was the opening night of the annual Scarefest event when this documentary was filmed, and thousands came to the park for the promise of a good, old-fashioned fright. Perhaps there is the key to the longevity of this old folktale. Why thousands still come and leave offerings at the crooked branches of the old oak tree. We are fascinated by the unknown, the shadows that move in between the laughter and the merriment, the unknowable search for the secrets we know are there, hidden away somewhere, out of sight. When you next come to Alton Towers and ride on Hex, remember the names and faces of this story, those who made ripples in the waters of time, and still haunt the ruins of the old theme park, even now.